Now that we've got that amazing round of energy go, let's talk about a completely boring fucking subject. At least on the surface, anyway. Today's workshop, by the way, for how many of you is this your first time experiencing the madness and mayhem that is David Snyder? Liar. Oh, you poor people. Okay, so today is, let me tell you something. For many years, today's topic, it's a 2-hour deep dive, if we can do that, into something that has been floating around the hypnosis world quite literally for centuries, decades at least, if not centuries. And it's the hypnotic power of stories. But it's going to be if you've been to treatments on story and story work that kind of focus on or pointed and maybe even a little bit disoriented. Because all the time that, if I take this off, please forgive me, I sometimes forget that I have to keep this on. In the 30, 40 years that I've been involved in the study of human influence, everybody would tell me about the hypnotic, compelling power of stories. And every time I would go to a story workshop or buy a story course, at the end of the course, I had the same look on my face. Like, what? And I realized after about the 4th or 5th course, by some of the experts, everything from David Gordon to Harlan Kilstein to, I forget who others, big Eric Sonius. And I'm not saying those things don't work. But if the only place we're going to use story is in the treatment room, man, I get bored with that shit really quick. But story is the most powerful, and my field is human influence, specialized human influence. How to stories are the most powerful, stories do this, stories do that. And it wasn't until I started really delving into the neuroscience and non-hypnotic applications of story that I started to realize there's a huge bank of stuff buried in science and literature and things of that nature. So, quick question. How many of you hate small talk?
Yeah.
Amen, brother. Right? How many of you, when you're in a line at Starbucks and somebody just starts talking to you, have no fucking clue what to say? Anybody? Okay. So what I'm going to do, I decided to make a long story short, I decided that if I wanted to find a class that would teach me what I wanted to know and needed to know about story, a class that would let me utilize story, attraction and relationships to leadership, to salesmanship, and beyond, I was going to have to create it. And so that's exactly what I did. I went and I dug deep and I kept looking and I kept researching, but I didn't start with not necessarily with the so-called experts in story. I started with the studies on story. I studied with the neuroscience. And then I looked at what the experts in various fields in corporate leadership and coaching and hypnosis, of course, NLP, and especially in the realm of public speaking. And I'm talking about like multi-million-dollar presenters like T. Harv Eker, Mark Victor Hansen, Lisa Sasevich, Robert Allen. You all know these people, right? And I discovered something. That there's, a lot of these people have speaker trainings, right? But there's a system behind the system that they don't always teach. And that has everything to do with the strategic delivery mechanism to prime behavior, to insert other types of technique, so that we're running to the back of the room to buy their stuff. Anybody here present or want people to run back to the back of the room to buy your stuff? Okay, if you're not, get the fuck out. Right? So what I'm going to share with you today is kind of a sample platter approach. I divided my course into 5 or 6 chapters, each one focusing on a different element or different application of story. And what I'd like to do, if that's okay, is I'd like to start with just some of the basic neuroscience. If we accept these things as true, and they are, then if we're not utilizing story, we're leaving a huge amount of persuasive power on the table, right? What you see up here is the title of my course, but what I want you to focus on is this right here. Everything I'm about to share with you, everything I'm about to teach you, presupposes know how to control your state. When we say control your state, it means that you know how to go into and out of any psycho-emotional state as an act of will. Okay? We spend an entire half day on that in our basic training. All right? Then we're going to teach, then you know how to get rapport. Okay? A deep level rapport. Now, if you understand story, you don't need the rapport training quite so badly, because when people start to become absorbed in your story, they'll fall into rapport, neurological rapport. And that's the kind of rapport I like. I like stuff that starts with the meat and works its way up. Okay? Then you use whatever language patterns or skills that you have in your repertoire to deliver your message. Now, if you're in my class, you start with the echo technique, then you learn the magnificent 7 plus or minus 2, then you might go to embedded commands, quotes patterns, IU shift, and analog marking. So we call that the Fantastic Four. Okay? But whatever you know, that's what you use. Okay? Helpful hint for presenters out there: if you want to get kinesthetic rapport with the audience, treat the audience as one being. Don't treat them as individuals. You'll fragment your energy. But if you treat them as one unit, one being with a collective, in each cell, each person is a cell in that collective consciousness, your mirror neurons will take that over, and your proprioception will embrace everyone. Okay? And again, they only gave me 2 hours. If this is the scope of everything there is to teach, I got time for this. So I'm going to be doing a lot of cliff notes and stuff like that. So from that, we're going to jump into their process. And process is going to be really, really important when we start looking at using story as a delivery mechanism for advanced hypnotic technique or NLP-style influence amplifiers. Okay? And then, of course, we want to take all of this and we want to target a person's emotional hot buttons. We want to emotionally bond them to us, our product, or our service, that a human being can hear at any given moment. If you want to, how many of you here would like to be able to talk in such a way that people just can't not pay attention to you? Would that be useful? Here it is. Here's the hack right now. The most powerful, most compelling words any human being can hear are the ones that just came out of their mouth. Right? And if you understand this, and I spent, in pretty much every single class I've taught so far, I've taught that same concept. Tomorrow when we do instant conversational hypnosis, you'll actually get to train in it. Like writing it, installing it, doing all those things. But when you want to gather attention, whether it's in a story, whether it's in marketing copy, whether it's one-on-one, the moment you give a person's own words back to them, it forces their nervous system to just completely orient on you. And everything you say goes right into the deepest, most influential parts of their neurology without mistranslation. And what happens is give back their words sincerely, yes. Okay? And then what happens is they feel better telling you more. And the longer they talk, this is for those of you who hate small talk, the longer they talk, the more connected to you they become. And you don't have to think of anything smart or intelligent or witty to say. Right? 80% of the work is done by the person you're doing this with. Right? Now we have little algorithms that we teach you later on to make this more organic. But the principle is people always accept themselves. So whatever a person says to you or gives to you, if you reflect it back to them effectively, we call it echo, they will orient on you in a way that gives you they give you their maximum attention. So here's another hack. I teach this in the attraction class that I teach. It's called analog matching. When people are in a conversation, when And if you're the female, you're talking about all the sunsets and the warmth and how wonderful it was. And the guy on the other side is like pretending to listen. Right? Really what he's doing is he's searching in his own head for a time in his life that was better, so he can top it, right? Or to tell you about himself, but they're not really listening. And at some point, doofus over here is going to tell their story, right? That's a normal, biological, social, communal function. But if you want to use story to make it even more powerful and more connection facilitating, there's a very simple tweak. When the person you're seeking to connect with, you're wanting to impress, tells you a story, listen to the exact words that they use to tell it. At some point in the conversation, it's going to be your turn to tell a story. The secret is make your story their words to do it, and you will fire off every neurological circuit they have pertaining to this shared experience. Okay? And you don't have to believe a single thing I tell you. Just go out amongst humans in their natural habitat and test it. Echo your waiters, your bartenders, and notice what happens. Right? Okay? So that's a really quick hack. But let's delve down into like this whole thing of story. Story by far, by the way, among all the things I teach, and I never really wanted to teach story to the general public. It was something, when I developed this particular protocol, it didn't involve stories. You didn't need it, right? But I kept hearing over and over and over again, story this, story that, story this, story that. But again, every time, every course that I ever took left me kind of, I know there's more here. My Snyder sense is signaling. Where there's smoke, there's fire. So I'm going to apologize for that. We only have 2 hours, and I want to take you as far as I can. And normally I would just drill down deep into one particular aspect, but I think it's important to broaden the spectrum of what we understand and the applications of story. So let's start with something very, very cool that I think is cool, and that's why I'm going to teach it, because I think it's cool. Right? First and foremost, this is the process I want you to have when you create and tell a story. I want you to know your outcome. Right? Know what you want to achieve by telling the story. Okay? There's 2 elements I want you to build into your stories. I'm actually going to jump to the 5th chapter, mega stories here. There's 2 things that I want you to start to put into your stories no matter what. No matter what story of all human influence. And I mean all human influence. This is a driver to everything that we do. The first one is called identification. Identification. The identification principle is pervasive in every level of human interaction. Okay? Identification means how much like you or like me are you? How much like me are you? This is such again, at the risk of scaring people, this is such a pervasive principle that it's commonly used by social predators to target their victims. Okay? And it can be as simple as you get on a bus, you're wearing a cool watch, you happen to see somebody on the bus wearing the same watch, the chances of you sitting closer to that person go up astronomically. Right? That's how pervasive this story should always have a protagonist. Right? Most people can't relate to a tomato plant that had feelings. Right? You think I'm joking. There are Ericksonian stories out there that this tomato plant can have certain feelings. Right? And it's tapping into a different principle. But to make things butthead simple, so that you can remember it, write it down, and employ it, The hero or heroine of your story should be as close to the people you're seeking to influence as possible. Now, how many were in the NLP copywriting workshop I did yesterday? You guys remember that avatar exercise? Might that be useful for this?
Oh, yes.
Amazing, right? This is why when I gave you that story template, I left that I kind of gave you teasers about story, right? But everything is connected to everything else. So first and foremost, make the people in your story as close to the target audience as possible. I'm going to cover this last piece. I'm going to kind of leave that loop open. We're going to go through some other stuff. I'm going to do some administrative things because I got a bunch of free gifts for you guys, and I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to get it. But I want to talk about the one that nobody ever talks about. Some people might know about this concept or this term, but one of the things that determines how deeply and how rapidly your story changes somebody's consciousness is a concept known as transportability. Transportability. How many have ever heard that term in connection to story? Who haven't taken my class? Okay, this is the one that if you want your stories to be as close to scientifically foolproof as possible, that you must understand. Okay, transportability, and this is based on the research that I gathered from a man named Dr. wrote a book called Omega Strategies. I warn you right up front, it's a very dry book. Basically just a compendium of scientific studies on various forms of strategies that reduce resistance to influence. So when we start to look at the scope of story, I divide story into basically 5 or 6 categories. The first category is, first of all, we talk about the neuroscience of it, but the second one is stories for captivating and connecting with others. Stories for captivating and connecting with others. And these stories and the system around this is designed around a 3 to 5 minute conversation where you're at line at Starbucks, you're waiting to get into a movie, if we ever get back to seeing movies again, right? And somebody just comes up to talk to you, or you want to talk to somebody else, and you want to connect, but you don't have anything to say, or you don't know what to say. Does that make sense? So if we have time, we'll do a connection. The information, I'm going to tell you, I take credit for the synthesis, not the source. The information for connecting with stories largely comes from the work of Vanessa Van Edwards, who runs schoolofpeople.com. She wrote a book called Fascinate, I believe it's, or is it Fascinate or Captivate? Anyway, great book, highly recommend Vanessa's work, okay? So the first thing we want to learn to do is use our stories to connect and create bonding with people in a very short period of time. And there's a structure that we can use. Now, if you're going to become a professional story influencer, you have to choose to do this. This is not something that you can just do randomly. Some people are just natural storytellers. The rest of us suck, right? I just said, right? Right? There is a skeleton and a structure to these things. But remember, when you're telling a story, it's never about you, even when it is. Right? If you're telling a story about yourself, remember, you're not telling that story for your benefit. You're telling it for theirs. And so it should always be centered around the audience and the listener. But we talk about stories to captivate and connect. Generate a propellant or a impellent effect in the persuasion. They amplify the push of our persuasion message. So if you see people, or you read stories about people's success stories, or people for overcoming objections, or they're amplifying the message that pushes this information into you, we call those alpha stories. And those are the ones you're most familiar with. And they work really, really well. Any form of leadership is usually an alpha story situation. So if you lead teams or groups of people, whether it's your local book club, or you're the CEO of a Fortune 100 company, alpha stories are leadership-oriented stories. They're stories that get people motivated, get people cohesive and together. they unite people, they inspire people, they motivate people. Those are alpha stories, okay? And there's themes and things you can do with that. And again, we don't have time to go into everything, but I want you to understand these categories so you can start to organize your particular approach to story. This next kind of story we're going to stories. Omega stories are narratives or stories, structures that remove or reduce resistance to persuasion. You understand? They reduce a person's friction or hesitancy to take action. In an alpha story, I'm going to build up your motivation to the point where whatever objections you had, you just roll over them, right? In an omega story, I'm just going to put more oil on the floor so the friction goes away, so it's easier to move people. You understand the difference? In either case, the last module, by the way, is called ninja stories. Ninja stories are NLP, well, they're not NLP stories. What they are is it's a story structure used as a delivery mechanism for multiple NLP warheads. And we have about 6 or 7 go-to techniques that you By the way, of the chapters that I mentioned, which one was like the most interesting? Chapter 1, captivating and connecting? Not so much. Okay. Fuck that. Give me the ninja shit, right? Alpha stories? 1 or 2? Omega stories? We're getting closer. Dare I ask? Ninja stories? Give me the sexy shit, David. All right. All right. So before we get into ninja stories, what I'd like us to do is I'd like to cover this whole concept of transportability. Because transportability, there are 6 key elements that maximize transportability within a story. The degree of influence that you exert is based on the degree of transportability in the story. Okay? So let's look at that. Narrative, aka story, when constructed properly to see how to build a story, are often more difficult to discount or argue than straightforward persuasive rhetoric. So if you have something that is, that you want to get across, if you just list the historical facts, it doesn't have nearly as much impact as if you do it in a story. And this is one of the things that as storytellers we need to understand. There is a tendency when we tell stories, especially now in the internet age, to try and summarize shit, to just get to the bottom line. That is not how your nervous system is actually primed to function, and especially where stories are concerned. So when you start to tell stories, avoid the desire to summarize. Avoid the desire to summarize. The plausibility principle is something that when we talk about omega strategies, we need to understand. Your brain doesn't care if something for that is most stories involve the retelling or the expression of somebody else's experience. You understand what I'm saying? When we're telling a story, we're almost always telling about somebody else's experience. And it's rude to challenge somebody else's experience. There's a truth bias that's inherent in all of us. And so even if it doesn't seem like it's possible, or true, I should say, even if it doesn't seem like it's true, if there's the slightest chance that it's plausible, your neurology will process it as true. The other side of story and narrative is that when you're in that narrative trance, there's a flow state going on in your body. There's a flow state going on in your body that even if you give incorrect information, 99% of the time the person hearing the story will ignore it because they don't want to break the flow of the narrative. You understand? So that's why and stories, no matter how obvious or indirect they may be, no matter how convoluted or simple, are never perceived consciously as an attempt to influence somebody. They're never directly perceived as, oh, he's trying to convince me to do this. It's weird, but they change attitudes and beliefs in the background. And part of that is due to an effect called the Thorndike effect, where you, every time you hear a story, you insert yourself into the perspective of the protagonist. You can't not do that. Okay? And so as you have the protagonist going through the behaviors and the attitude changes and the revelations that lead to the change for them, the reader and the listener go through it vicariously as well, especially if they're identified with it. Okay? But fact or fiction doesn't matter. While it's true that experiences of fictional characters are not objectively real, this detail does not seem made up. It'll still work. It'll still work. And again, it goes back to this idea that the experience of any character is equally difficult to refute if the subject considers those experiences plausible. Now, I gave you a language pattern, 2 language patterns, in fact, yesterday, that activates the plausibility factor in the human neurology. You guys remember what that is? Those of you who are there? Okay, for those of you who don't, here it is. Let me find my cool pen. The language pattern is called the cause and effect language pattern. Cause and effect. Words in this category include because, causes, allows, makes, generates, triggers. Now these are just examples. Okay? Sequence of events. The sequence of events always follows this. Something happens, it causes something else, and that means somebody has to do something else, or it has a meaning to it. We call that cause-effect meaning. That is the internal structure of belief. It's also the internal structure of narrative. Right? So many times when you read stories, there will be physical actions that lead to other actions, but inside the mind of the client, there are meanings associated to each of those actions. That's your equivalence, okay? Without getting too far into jargon, we have language patterns that amplify these effects. But in the neurology, the hierarchy of the human nervous system, everything starts with awareness, and then the human neurology seeks to create a causal linkage from one event to the next. When we understand the cause and effect language pattern, we can hijack that mechanism. We can make anything we want seem to cause anything we want in the mind of the plausibility seems to be the single biggest factor in determining the acceptance of a metaphor. Yes, can we have a mic runner? I love questions, but they always make me chase squirrels.
You said as long as it's possible, the mind will follow. What about the fiction?
What about it?
Things that are way out of range.
If they're absorbed and transported, it won't matter. That's why we're talking about transportability. There are 6 key elements that you need to build into your story, and I'm also going to share with you basically a questionnaire. You got to understand, I spend a lot of time dealing with personal injury attorneys, professional influencers, and personal injury attorneys spend an inordinate amount of time testing cases. In other words, before they actually go to trial, they will bring in focus group after focus group after focus group, and they will take the case that they've prepared along with the stories and the narrative, and they will present how effective their case is based on the responses of the focus group. Now, if you understand effective, first of all, you need the rapport skills that we talk about in CPI 1 or killer influence, but whatever rapport skills you have, that's usually enough. So if you've got, I designed this primarily in that context, that if you have a story that you're going to use for a presentation, if you were to assemble a group of people that are as similar to the target audience as possible, you follow these steps, you present your story, and you hand them this questionnaire. you would have a way to effectively evaluate the transportational magnitude of the story. Now, part of the story is always going to be how it's connected, how it's created, the believability of the characters. The other part is how you deliver it, right? Delivery makes a difference, but if the structure is correct, the elements you want are there, then you're stacking the deck in your favor for when you deploy these stories. Stories also prime people to take certain types of actions and certain PI class that I teach, we actually spend like a good half a day deconstructing the stories and transcripts of one of T. Harv Eker's seminars. And we show you step by step all the presuppositions, all the embedded commands, all the story priming inherent in what he's doing with the audience, and how he's actually modeling behaviors and the actions that he wants people to take in those stories. We just break it apart, right? And usually it simultaneously terrifies and inspires people when you realize just how pervasive the people using this stuff professionally, not teaching you how to do it, but using it on you, and how well it drives. And TJ gets flashbacks every time because he was in the audience before he learned about this. And he whipped out his credit card just like half the room and ran to the back and became a trainer under T. Harv Eker. Anyway, so let's look at this transportability idea. Again, okay? People inherently identify with the characters within the stories they read. More identification equals more acceptance. Okay, and I'm kind of beating the dead horse with this, but these are the two things. By the way, if you want to know the universal psychology of attraction algorithm, looks something like this. Proactivity, identification, emotional appeal, credibility, and affirmation. When you you create emotional addiction in people. And we can create what psychoanalysts and psychotherapists call an unbalanced power dynamic, where they become increasingly reliant on you and your opinions. And this is where you can get people to do things that aren't always in their best interest. But as a therapist, we can harness this idea to guide people through change work processes and make powerful changes in their lives, and then give them their autonomy back. Right? Notice what it starts with. Proactivity, identification. Why? Because spies, undercover agents, and all the other bad guys, first thing they're going to do is they're going to research as much about their audience as possible. Why? So or person, and they're going to create some form of credibility in their world. Usually it's a title, like a doctor, or reverend, or minister, or teacher. Somebody older, somebody richer, somebody wealthier. And then they're going to affirm. They're going to take that person's side and befriend them. And if that person gets picked on, they're going to say, hey, don't worry about them. You're fine the way you are. They're the idiots. Sound familiar? Right? That's the formula. But notice what it starts with. Okay? So omega stories are designed to reduce the negative thoughts associated with a persuasive message, while at the same time increasing the positive thoughts about a behavior, attitude, or object. So, a couple of things. Make your protagonist as likable by your target audience. and the guy's last name is Snyder. It's not me. It's not a relative. But he's basically a professional screenwriter and copywriter. He teaches classes on it. Now, you've all seen movies where the hero of the movie is just plain a bad guy, right? And then at some establishing moment in the beginning of the movie, maybe he just robbed a bank or just shook down some idiot in a back alley somewhere, and he's running out and he sees a little cat. Meow, meow. Little hungry cat. And he's like, the cops are coming. Shit, he scoops up the cat and he takes it home and he feeds it. And you instantly like the bad guy. Right? That's the whole concept of save the cat. So even when the bad guy is the good guy, make sure you put a device in the story that lets you know he did a bad thing, but he's really not a bad guy or bad girl. Does that make sense? Save the cat. Make the protagonist as similar as possible to your target demographic. The attitude to be transferred. Empathy and cognitive rehearsal of beliefs. Let's talk about this. Subjects actively feel and rehearse the experiences of the subject in their own minds and imaginations, identifying with them and adopting the narrative in their own life. Okay? Let's go to transportability. Okay, transportability, as we talk about it, is a measurement. It's a measurement of how readily a story causes a person to become fully absorbed in it, to the point where, you guys, how many people have ever seen a movie? All right, cool. It's a weird question, right? It's like, no, I've never seen a movie, fuck you. Right? But you walk in, you walk into that movie theater, got your big bucket of popcorn in one hand, best guy or best girl in the other, you're walking down the aisle wondering which one's gonna be more fun, right? The lights go down, the curtain opens, for the next hour, you became fully absorbed in it? The answer should be no. Because if you could tell me when that happened, it means you weren't absorbed. So transportability is a measurement of how rapidly that happens and how much of it you remember afterwards. Okay, we're going to talk about these 6 characteristics. Is this useful so far? Okay. There are 5 areas where transportability is measured. High transportability scores are predictive of how easily persuaded a person can be by a well-constructed narrative. First of all, cognitive attention. How much attention is the subject actually paying to the story? Scale of 0 to 10. How much, right? Was the subject mentally involved in the narrative while experiencing it? Seems simple. Emotional involvement. How emotionally engrossed and connected is the subject to the story? Or do you actually share how it made the person feel, and maybe exhibit some of those emotions yourself, right? How much do you bring that story to life? If you become emotionally involved in your story, the readers, the subjects, can't help become emotionally involved as well. That's why I tell anybody who wants to be an unstoppable hypnotist, take some acting classes, specifically method acting. And actors, in terms of being in front of people and doing stuff, are the most powerful hypnotists on the planet. Okay? Their entire craft is designed to do one thing: to take you out of your world and suck you into theirs in a pleasant, enjoyable way, right? Take some lessons, okay? Emotional involvement. Are they feeling the emotions of the subject or responding emotionally to the events in the story? When you're telling this story and you get to a moment, are they on the edge of their seat as you're getting to that cliffhanger? As you're building the suspense? I'm skipping ahead. How badly does the subject want to find out what happens next? I told you guys in the copywriting exercise, what's the purpose of your headline? To suck them in and to get them to do what? Read the first line. What's the purpose of the first line of copy? Get the second line. And that's the whole point. When you construct copy, you want to engineer it in such a way that they want to find out what happens next. And as long as you do that, you will pull them deeper and deeper into absorption and transportability. Okay? Now, did I give you guys a language pattern yesterday? And because a bunch of you were here yesterday, did I give you guys a language pattern that sucks people in?
Yes.
Which one was that? I don't know, it was yesterday. Adverbative presupposition, right? What does it do? It forces a person's internal experience to be exactly what you describe. And I gave you
The 2 words before and the one after the subject.
oh, that's an algorithm that you use. 2 in the front, 1 in the back. Not what you think. This is Vegas, I know, but it's not what you think. Right? Some of you got that, right? Come out of trance. Right? So state of suspense. How badly do they want to find out what happens next? Right? And I actually kind of gave you a little bit of this when we talked about bullet points, didn't I? When I talked about, I'm going to teach you the awareness language pattern. I'm going to teach you the cause and effect language pattern. I'm going to teach you the complex equivalence language pattern. And everyone was like, eh. But then I said, what if you could magically force anything you want to mean anything you want in the mind of your listener? What if you could secretly make anything you want cause anything you want in the mind of your listener? Does that make you want to find out more? Right? It's the same idea. These same concepts translate to any narrative. Okay? Any narrative. We want to suck them in. We want to create that state of suspense and give them a reason to keep going. To what degree is a subject so focused on the events occurring that they become unaware of everything else? You've all had this experience when you were so engrossed in a movie. Somebody could have fired a gun off next to you. You wouldn't have noticed. We want that. Okay? My kids are the poster children for that. Okay? The minute the TV is on, come to dinner. Come to dinner. Right? We've all been there. Mental imagery. Mental imagery. Do they vividly, let me read this here. Do they vividly picture the events of the story in their mind? Once again, I gave you a language pattern for that, right? Gave you a language pattern for that. When you're evaluating a story for yourself, maybe you've heard a story, maybe you created the story. Remember, it's the person least qualified to evaluate the power of your story is the person who wrote it. And so what's going to happen is every time you read that story, you're going to fill in all the imperfections and all the neuroassociations. So once you've created a story, you've got to sit on it for a little while. You got to stick it in a drawer, go, drink a couple beers, have a couple martinis, do something different for a day or two, come back, and then maybe evaluate it. But even then, what I would do is I would give the story to somebody else to read, or read the story to somebody else, and then have them give you feedback on these 5 characteristics, and rate it, scale of 0 to 10. And then, of course, the more people you test against that, the more confidence you can have in the power of that particular story. And one of the things that you want to begin to do, if you're going to utilize story in your business in any way, shape, or form, and I take this directly from direct response copywriters, who, by the way, are the best hypnotists in print on the planet, especially the old school ones. Their entire job, before pre-internet days, their job was to make you read it, cut out the order form, fill it out, reach into your wallet, pull out your checkbook, fill out the check, put it in an envelope, address the envelope, put a stamp on it if you had stamps at home, otherwise you had to go to the post office, and then mail it and wait 6 weeks. If people can be successful under those conditions, you guys have no excuse on the internet, right? But you have to remember that the steps have to be simpler, they have to be smaller, they have to be smoother. But the same principles apply. Pam, question for Pam? Hold on, where's the microphone?
Would it help to read from back to front?
Yeah, if you're going to edit it. for grammar, for spelling, things like that. But when you want to measure transportability, because they're your words, you're language of your audience. Remember, we talked about going to Amazon, listening to the people who call you up. How do they describe their problems? What are the most common words they use? It's all shades of the echo technique, right? And again, the more it matches what's inside of the people, the more absorbed, i.e. transported, they become. Does that make sense? Okay. So, but if you're the only one who can evaluate your story, give yourself a few days. And maybe what you do is, you can do this a couple of ways. You could read it, which may be dangerous in terms of getting an accurate evaluation. You could read it into a tape recorder or an audio recorder and listen to it and see how you can improve it. Say, oh, if I put an adverb adjective precept here, I could really generate, or if I could just more cause and effect or complex equivalence or whatever. If I could just put a couple different phrases in there, I might get more out of that. Does that make sense? By the story, right? If you can watch Old Yeller, some of you don't even know who Old Yeller was, right? And not shed a tear, you're a psychopath. No, I don't. No. But that's my point. Think about these really emotionally gripping movies. That's what we want. It's emotion that changes minds, not facts. In fact, the neuroscience behind that says that if without emotion, you can't make a decision. Scientists took I think it was animals they did this with. Maybe they also inspected or researched people who had brain injuries. But they took animals, probably monkeys, and they literally disconnected with surgery the emotion parts of their brain. And then they had these people try to make decisions, and they couldn't. Their logical centers were perfectly intact, but they could not make a decision. Thinking creatures. We're animals who learn to think. We feel. The meat gets activated, then the emotions, then our thought patterns follow the feelings. All right? Did I want to learn how the story ends? Once again, this goes to that whole suspension point. Did I want to know, even if I wrote the story, was I like salivating to get to the end? Did I want to know how it turned out? Right? How much attention were you paying to what was going on elsewhere in the room? Because most of us do this. They put on a podcast or some shit, and then they go and wash dishes or laundry or whatever. Think of all the times when the podcast just sucked you away from whatever you were doing. You have an example of good transportability. Right? We want that. We want people to get so sucked in to what's happening that nothing else matters. Right? A lot of this will sound like repetition. Two biggest factors in maximizing transportability are the construction of the narrative and the delivery of the story. Okay? Again, I can teach you what to build in. I have classes for teaching you how to deliver it, but whatever presentation skills you have, use them. Okay? Transported subjects are less able to detect or even recall false notes in the story. Even if some of your information is wrong, contradictory statements, inconsistencies, incongruencies, the greater the transportation, the higher the acceptance rate of the messages within the narrative, and the less analysis the subject can perform, hence, less resistance to the persuasive message. Now, you guys had a sample of this yesterday, didn't you? When I would riff some hypnotic language at you, and you're like, ah, la, la, la. You're like, you're having a good time. I just love listening to David talk. And then what did I do? Language patterns, but it was also kind of a narrative. We want that power. We want that ability, because once a person is in that flow, human beings are addicts to flow. Once they're in it, they don't want to get out of it. Okay? Human beings are never not in trance. They're state chasers. They're always looking to go from one state to the next state to the next state. Okay? Everything, that's why we have the song, Hooked on a Feeling. It's a reminder that every single thing human beings do is in search of a feeling they want more of, or a feeling they want a whole lot less of. And there's always an order. Okay? I saw your hand, Muriel, by the way. Can someone give her the microphone?
Does it mean ideally if somebody doesn't remember what happened in the book, but they remember how they felt and
they were transported, right? And you guys played with, how many, when we did the Wham Bam Grey Room Slam during day 3 of Identity by Design, the 30-second Grey Room technique, what did we do? And know exactly where you were. That's absorption, right? Powerful, powerful stuff. Was that trance? You bet your ass. Human beings are never not in trance. Remember that. Your job isn't putting people in trance. It's getting them out and into the state that's more useful. Okay? Let's see here. Transported subjects tend to endorse the beliefs implied by the narrative. They tend to adopt beliefs that are consistent with those in the story, independent of their initial attitudes. So maybe you're a die-hard right-wing SOB. When you hear the story, even if you're not a full, maybe you're not a full convert to the cause, but by the end of the story, you're a lot softer in your stance. Okay? It's never perceived as transportational the story, the more powerfully it does that without calling attention to itself. Right? That's I gave that criticism many times. This year, last 3 years in a row, 4 years, last 3 of the last 4 years, I was voted the number 2 NLP trainer in the world by globalgurus.org, right? This year I was number 1, thanks to you. I appreciate that, thank you. But I'm very critical of NLP, very, very often. And the reason is because NLP is so powerful. Sometimes it's too powerful. You can walk up to somebody and slam them with an NLP technique, and it's so powerful, they know you did something. They may have no clue what you did, but they know you did something, and so they automatically become reactant. They dig, psychologically, mentally, physically, or emotionally, they dig their heels in the sand, and they start looking for your angle. Right? That creates defensiveness, and they start. Want to take. So when you're dealing with good NLP, they should never feel the push unless you intentionally want them to. How does that relate to this? Stories never trigger that alarm. Just telling the story. Another example. How many people here have ever been little children? Okay, cool. How many people here, when you were a little child, played pretend? Right? Now, how many tomboys do we have in the room? Cool. How many tom girls? I'm from California, I have to ask. Right? In the backyard, you're 5 years old playing pretend. Now, how many people were super soldiers? Right? Maybe you're Rambo, or maybe Captain America, or Wonder Woman. Superheroes? Any superheroes? Cool. How about any girly girls? Playing teacups with Teddy. It's okay, no judgment, I've done it. I have 2 daughters, I have no choice, right? Okay. How many of them talk back? We have meds for you, it's okay. So you're in the backyard, right? You're 5 years old, and you decide you're gonna play your favorite imagination game. Maybe we'll use just as an example, we're going to play soldier, right? You pick up a stick in your backyard, right? And for the first 5 minutes that you're playing with that stick, consciously, you know it's just a stick. 6.5 minutes later, it's a real M60, you're really Rambo, and there's really bad guys out there, and you're going, kill, 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 die, 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 kill, 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 die, 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 right? Let me ask you a question. Were you really seeing those motherfuckers? I mean, in your head, were you really seeing them? Were you really shooting them? Right? Were you asleep? The answer is no. Hopefully. Were you absorbed in what you were you having a ball? Food, right? All you have to do to get any change you want in people is induce that. Stories do that automatically. So even if you know consciously that there's an agenda behind the story, within 3 to 5 sentences, absorption is going to kick in. When Richard teaches nested loops, I used to love going to watch Richard. Everybody should, first of all, if you have never been trained in NLP, get your prac certification before you go see Richard. Because it's like you don't know anything about music and you're watching a master perform. You love the music, but you don't really understand the skill he's applying because you don't have that repertoire, right? So get your prac training first, then go see Richard and watch. Most people just go to sit in the room with Richard and let him program them, right? But what's funny to me so often, and they never do. Why? Because he nests stories. He'll tell one story, and then he'll start another story. And then he'll start another story. And 3 stories in, you are back in the 5-year-old playing soldier. You have no clue what's what. And then he'll close them in reverse order. We'll teach you that in our presentation skills class. But it's the same thing. He's gonna create this complete cognitive absorption in what he's doing. And then he's gonna use that to deliver amplified suggestion on multiple levels simultaneously. There's the content side of it, the story that you get swept up in. Then there's the internal structure and the behaviors of the story that prime what actions they want you to take. And then there's the amplifiers, the subtle language shifts and presuppositions layered in there that push it even further. So when you try to unpack Richard, good luck. Just go and get programmed. Okay? Done. He says, come and see me privately so I can close all the loops I opened. Because it's what he does. He opens loops throughout the first few days of the training. He layers all kinds of suggestions in there. And then he closes them in the order that he gave them, and you have amnesia for all the direct suggestion. You can do that too. You should be doing it. But you need to understand the structure and the inner architecture of what you're doing and why you're doing it. Does that make sense? Okay. And by the way, we're not going to be talking about nested loops in this class, more than what we've just done. Pre-existing beliefs. This is weird. Right? You wouldn't think this. Pre-existing beliefs do not affect transportation. I'm talking super fascist right wing. You're a dyed-in-the-wool communist. You stay in the room, you listen to the story, it's not going to matter. You're going to get sucked in. Something's going to get installed. The more cumulative that effect. We call that the law of compounding. Right? Fact or fiction seems to make no difference. Subject's belief about whether the narrative was fact or fiction had no impact on either transportation or the endorsement. I can highlight this for you. The endorsement and adoption of beliefs. This is the neuroscience. Okay, this is the social psychology. This is not Erickson making up a tomato story metaphor. This is what the science is showing us. When these 6 factors are in play, and you facilitate transportation, it doesn't matter if it's true, it doesn't matter if they have a diametrically opposed belief system, it will reduce the resistance to your message. Okay? I tell people go through the life with the equivalent of a jet engine and an anchor strapped to their back. That's what this is. Okay.
theory that blank hit plausibility. That was just on the screen. It was just like, the theory that blank is the biggest factor.
It was supposed to be a test.
Yes, exactly.
Supporting the theory that plausibility is the biggest factor in whether a message is accepted, true or not. Okay. Assessing transportability. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go through this checklist really quick. We're going to take a 10-minute break. When we come back, we're going to start on ninja stories. We're going to show you the 6 or 7 techniques that when you tell a story. Now again, I save ninja stories for last because if you can't tell a good story, this shit ain't going to help you. Right? If you can't facilitate absorption in the narrative, they're not going to listen. Right? So when we come back from our break, we'll go through these. I'll show you how they work, how to layer them in. So whatever stories you have, you can start to embed these. Now, another loop I'm going to close real quick. Take a lesson. A swipe file is a file where they keep copies of sales letters, emails, stories that worked, whether they worked for you or they worked for somebody else. And whenever they need to create copy or to have a story for a situation, they go through their file, they find the one that seems to be the best fit, and then they use that as a template and modify it for that audience or that target. I'm going to recommend, if you're going to be someone who's going to use stories professionally, that you begin the process of creating your own story files. And stories from one category can easily be modified to other stories, right? You just emphasize different things in the story. But when you have them, you're never at a loss. Does that make sense? Okay. In fact, if you go back and you watch a lot of my YouTube videos, you'll see me telling the same stories over and over and over again. Why? Because they work. It's not random. It's tested. The transportive capacity of a story or narrative, assessing how prone for transportation a subject may be, ask them the following questions. Now, some of these are can I easily envision the events of the story? 0 to 9. Can I find or lose myself in the story? Do I find it difficult to tune out activities around me? Now, this particular one is actually reversed. And what I mean by that is, the higher up the scale you go, it means the less you were. So how much do I lose? Do I forget? Okay. And if you want, I can probably post this so you have it. Okay. Do I find it difficult to tune out activities around me? Again, the lower on the scale, the better off, right? So 0 being I have no difficulty tuning the shit around me out. 9 is I have extreme difficulty tuning shit. Shit being a technical term, mind you. You just can't stop thinking about it. We want that. Because every time you think about it, you revisit it and you reinforce it. I'm often impatient to find out how the story ends. I find I can easily take the perspective of the characters in the story. Once again, goes to identification. I'm often emotionally affected by what I've read. Do you think this might be a useful questionnaire for a prospective hypnosis client? Yeah, right. I have vivid images of the characters. I find myself accepting events I might otherwise have considered unrealistic. Don't we do that all the time? Ever read Peter Pan? Right? I find myself thinking about the other ways the story could have ended. My mind often wanders. Once again, 0 to 9. If my mind is 0, my mind doesn't wander at all. Right? I often find that reading stories often has an impact on the way I see things. I easily identify with characters in the story, and I have the 5 elements of transportability combined with identification. And these abilities to gauge and assess the impact of that story are major tools where we can create very powerful narratives that reduce resistance to what we're saying, and then we can add into those the ninja techniques that NLP loves to use with story. Okay? Before we take our break, do we have any questions about what we covered? Yes? Renee?
We have a good example. I'm sorry.
Do you have a good example of an omega story?
Not handy.
Okay.
Not handy. But if you read Eric Knowles' book, I might actually, I can look through the rest of the manual and see if I have something that would do double duty for that and share it with you. But again, like I said, if this is the scope of everything, I'm cherry picking big time, right? Okay? And what I'd like you to do with that little red notebook, I'd like you to take the pen out, and on the first page, I'd like you to write your name, address, email, and phone number. And the reason for that is I told you I had some gifts for you guys. Oops. So usually I hand these out to the group so they have a listing of them, but we didn't have enough time to get enough copies made for everybody. So I'm just going to read this to you. This is a copy of our events calendar for 2020, 2021. And we will be adding and modifying events, so there will be more coming. In the back of this catalog is also all of the video, the full-length video courses that we have available for you. And Stephanie, I might make copies of it and leave them at Stephanie's desk so you can have it. But if you were to go to Mondo Supremo I Want It All package, it's option D. What you'll see is a training program, a package that we're offering. $500 or less. If you were to want to get that today, it's $27.94. Your choice of any 2 full-length video courses, which are usually 3, 5, 7-day courses, valued at $14.97 or less. You get to choose any 2. And your choice of any 5 smaller digital products, usually around $4.97 and below, is where that starts. If you were to try to buy this from the website today, the total package price would be $7,979. And I'm not telling you this because I'm trying to sell it to you. I'm telling you this because someone in this room today is going to go away with one of them. We're going to have a raffle, and one lucky person is going to get a Mondo Supremo package so they can come and train and get a lot of cool videos absolutely free. It's my gift. Okay? So what I need you to do is I need you to fill out your name, address, and email. Pass them to the large bearded man right here. He'll come around. For those of you who care, my website, nlppower.com, has been, for the past few days, has been running a flash sale. And I'd like to give you guys an opportunity to get some good stuff for half price. Would that be okay? So all you need to do is go to, and write this down on the second page of your notebook. You go to www.nlppower.com, and this applies to any product on the website. You can't stack this with other discounted items, but if you want one of our full-length video courses or there's something that you're interested in, you use the coupon code HOTFLASH2020 at www.nlppower.com, coupon code HOTFLASH2020. By the way, at Hypnothoughts, I got that. This is the only group I've offered it to. So those of you at home, this might be cool for you because you can't be in the raffle. Sorry. But I think it's important that, we give to each other as much as we can. So make that a little bit smaller. So www.nlppower.com, 50% off every course in the store. And you can buy multiple courses. HotFlash2020 is your coupon code. So Seth, where did Seth go? Is he still collecting stuff? Okay, cool. We'll do that again right before we break. For our class, we'll do that right before. So let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. I know it's a little short. Take a 10-minute restroom break. When we come back, we're going to jump into ninja stories. Okay?